And, you know, Bruce was very sure of himself and knew he can handle himself. So, you know, the Gung Sao matches, which are the rooftop fighting matches, happened a lot, and Bruce was part of that.
After getting beaten one time, Bruce Lee decided to learn a martial art that could be used in real-life situations. He began by learning Wing Chun, and by the time he arrived in Seattle in 1959, he was a competent teacher. Taki Kimura was one of Bruce Lee's first students and closest friends.
This young man at 18 was a holy terror in terms of athleticism. I mean, he was all Hong Kong champion cha-cha dancer. His brother was all Hong Kong champion fencer, so he became an avid fencer. And of course, he did a lot of boxing on the street, you know, in fights and things. He had a pretty good hold in boxing, and so this guy, when he came over, he was an all-around athlete.
Taki Kimura was one of a small but dedicated group of followers who Bruce Lee began teaching in Seattle. Another of his first students was his wife-to-be, Linda.
You would just pass through a doorway here, and it would go down the stairs into the basement, and it was just a plain room with concrete walls and swinging light bulb, and he had, maybe 10 or 12 students at the most at one time in a class.
In 1966, the couple moved to Los Angeles for Bruce to start work on the Green Hornet. He opened up a gym in Oakland and also began teaching private students, including actors Steve McQueen and James Coburn. It was during this period that he began mixing different fighting styles to develop his own martial art of Jeet Kune Do.
He was frustrated by the limits of traditional martial arts. So if you did karate, you didn't do any ground fighting, or you didn't do any throws. If you did judo, you didn't do any punching or kicking. You know, if you did kung fu, you had to stand a certain way and strike a certain way and do set combinations of moves. And he thought all of that was just getting in the way and being impractical. You had to be adaptable because fighting could go anywhere. Fighting wasn't contained by rules. If someone was going to attack you, who knew what they'd do? So you had to be ready for anything. So that was quite a revolutionary way of thinking.
Since creating Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's martial art has spread as far afield as Scotland. This is Glasgow, one of the most violent cities in Europe. More people die of assaults here than almost any other European city. Tommy Carruthers is a former club doorman who turned to Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do to protect himself from violent attack.
I would say the preferred weapon in Glasgow would be the knife. There's more stabbings here than anything else.
Tommy was trained by Bruce Lee's last private student and protege, Ted Wong. Since taking up Jeet Kune Do, he's become one of the top practitioners and one of the few people in the world qualified to teach it. He uses Jeet Kune Do to train people in self-defense so that they can use it if attacked on the street.
We really try and take the stuff and apply it to real-life situations, because the guys are here really to learn how to fight.
Tommy Carruthers reveals the key to Jeet Kune Do, its simplicity and economy, making it useful in a real attack. In some martial arts, an arm grab might entail a series of complicated moves, but not in Jeet Kune Do.
Traditional martial arts seems to be a long-winded affair about going from point A to point B. There's many ways we could show you to give an example. If you look at Bruce's idea, and it's really just based on what would be the closest and where your hands and feet are in relation to the opponent. I just feel in this situation here that because my leg is near his knee, but the groin feels an easier target. So if I was grabbed, I feel as if the groin shot would be easier. This would be a better move than just doing this here. And again, we could punch.
Bruce Lee's revolutionary approach to fighting has been adopted around the world in sports such as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Violent and competitive combat using mixed martial arts.
He was always trying to figure out the science of fighting. And the reality is, you have to have a little piece of everything to be a complete fighter. That's what mixed martial arts is. And Bruce Lee is the father of mixed martial arts.
Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon, has come to Las Vegas to see her father's influence in action.
Talked about Kenny Florian. Good
nice
kick
kick
by
to the
Bruce. my dad would have really enjoyed UFC. I think he was very into real combat. His art is all about being a complete fighter and being able to handle any situation you find yourself in. And so this is really the closest you can get to it.
Mixed martial arts is now one of the fastest growing sports in the world. This UFC heavyweight title fight, where Randy Couture famously lost his crown to Brock Lesnar, was one of the biggest pay-per-view events of the year. It attracted more than 1 million viewers and generated more than $50 million in sales. Bruce Lee's influence on the sport is acknowledged by many of the fighters.
I've been watching his movies, studying his martial art and philosophy since I was like 8 to 10 years old, and it completely changed my entire aspect on fighting.
Once again, it's Bruce Lee's focus on economy, simplicity, and directness that clicks with UFC fighters.
What Bruce Lee used to do was work on circular movement. So if that jab came, he'd work things like this so that he's opening up targets here. In kickboxing nowadays, or MMA, we're doing the same kind of motions, only we're just limiting here so that our body is still open, so that I can do things like take people down, or I can parry that punch to throw a kick. But it's that same basic principle of redirecting motion.
He said that if you can't do something live, it's pointless. So what I need to do is take those tactics and those techniques, remove them, and put them in live training scenarios, sparring. And you have to learn what is going to work in all these different scenarios and be able to employ that right away, without thinking, muscle memory. In Enter the Dragon, the first scene in the movie, they have mixed martial arts gloves. Those are almost exactly the same kind of gloves we fight in today. So the gear he used back then is the same gear we use today. And you see Bruce Lee hit a takedown and go into an armbar, which before UFC, the general public didn't know what an armbar is. But now looking back, 30 years back, 40 years back, we're seeing before anyone really knew what it was, he was employing these tactics.
And while Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do revolutionized the world of martial arts, his approach to health and physical fitness would change the way other athletes and sports people train their bodies forever. Martial artists and sportsmen admire him for his physical dexterity, power, and speed. Philosophers respect him for bridging the philosophical divide between East and West. But here at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California, are another group of people who hold Bruce Lee up as an inspiration for their community. The bodybuilders. Gold's Gym is the mecca of bodybuilding. It was here that Arnold Schwarzenegger trained, and where many of the world's champion bodybuilders come to hone their physiques. Flex Wheeler is one of the most successful bodybuilders of his generation, winning numerous titles before retiring in 2002.
Probably two of the biggest things that Bruce Lee was known as far as his physical attribute. One would be his lats, because he had incredible lats, and then also his abs. Another thing also would be from the rear, his back. In bodybuilding, we call it a Christmas tree. So for a person, you know, having a Christmas tree back in that era is just profoundly unknown or unheard of.
Other bodybuilding luminaries, such as Lou Ferrigno, Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, as well as Mr. Schwarzenegger, have all expressed the huge impact Bruce Lee's physique had on them.
There are a surprising number of professional bodybuilders who are Bruce Lee fans. And really, it comes down to Bruce's abs. He has a legendary set of abs, deep cuts, incredible serratus muscles, and I think bodybuilders admire that.
In the bodybuilding world, I think Bruce Lee came in and really was one of the first proponents of definition as opposed to just sheer bulk. Because if you look at the bodybuilding champions of that era, they were all just massive. They were just huge. And there was him who really came in and said symmetry, definition, you know, getting cut was the big thing. But that was the first time, it was really with Bruce Lee, that became something to aspire to.
As well as inspiring bodybuilders, Bruce Lee was quick to use their techniques in his own workouts.
He was kind of a pioneer in a number of different things, whether it was his dieting or extra training, but he was one of the first that I knew of that actually incorporated, you know, bodybuilding and bodybuilding type movements into his regime as a martial artist. Back then, even now,